Imagine this. You're worth $9 billion. You're hopping off a private jet, and everything is just going spectacular. The only problem is that your life is a lie, and everything is soon to come crashing down. Dozy Mmobuosi has just been charged with committing securities fraud. His company claimed to have 9 million customers, when, in reality, they had about 0. They claimed to have 60 million in the bank, despite only having 2,000. The company used to have a valuation of over $1 billion, but now, trading their stock is suspended. Although he's now labeled as an obvious fraudster, things weren't always this cut and dry. Where did it all go wrong for Dozy Mmobuosi? Dozy was born in Lagos, Nigeria in 1979. He says he was always something special when he was younger and claims that he always had an entrepreneurial spirit. After becoming a teenager, he says that he ran a magazine, was a show promoter, and sold used clothing. He also says that he thought of an online video sharing website 5 years before YouTube even became a thing. Dozy says that he was pretty popular in school. Apparently, peers would call him the General because he would go to insurance companies and banks and tell them how they can improve their operations. He claims to have received a Bachelor of Science degree in political science, Master of Science degree in economics, and a doctorate in rural advancement. This means I ought to start putting some respect on Dozy. Dr. Dozy is what I would call him if any of this was actually true. At least the education part. Hindenburg Research took a look at Dozy's past and felt like something was fishy. They contacted the university he attended to receive his doctorate degree and got the response that Dozy had never attended their university. He may have never attended this university, but one thing he did attend was the Slammer because he was arrested due to issuing bad checks. Dozy also claims that he built the first mobile payment platform in Nigeria. Dozy seems to be a man of all talents. Being such a talented man, Dozy would get ready to pull off his biggest scheme yet. In 2001, Dozy would go on to found Tingo Mobile. Tingo purchased phones and leased them to farmers who otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford them. Considering this business model, Tingo would also create an online Nigerian marketplace where you can trade crops, supplies, and other agriculture-related goods. This idea connected farmers and helped stimulate commerce in a way that the country had not seen before. Tingo would remain relatively silent in the first 18 years of its creation. Tingo really wouldn't make much noise in Nigerian media, but flash forward to the year 2019, and Tingo Mobile is claiming that they have leased to 9 million customers in Nigeria. Having hundreds of millions of dollars in annual revenue, Dozy thought it was time to make a bold move. Things were smooth sailing with Tingo, but to take things to the next level, he wanted to get listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Dozy applied to list his company on the New York Stock Exchange in November of 2020. Considering Tingo was raking in 9 figures a year, he was sure Tingo would be listed. To his surprise though, Tingo was rejected. This left Dozy feeling a bit demotivated, but he didn't give up. 8 months later, Dozy decided that his best course of action would be selling Tingo to another company. Tingo Mobile was sold to iWeb. This was great, but iWeb was an OTC-listed company. They weren't even on the New York Stock Exchange themselves. iWeb was a company in Thailand that primarily focused on selling software to the Thai government. Unfortunately though, this just simply was a failing business. iWeb needed to keep the lights on, and they saw Dozy as their key to success. That being said, they bought Tingo Mobile for $3.7 billion. This might sound like amazing news for Dozy, but the deal wasn't really as great as it sounds. iWeb paid Dozy with iWeb stock. Considering iWeb was heavily failing as a company, they had a low stock price paired with low trading volume. Basically, Dozy was still in the same boat as before. He was worth almost $4 billion on paper, but he would never be able to liquidate the iWeb shares that he owned. Dozy would become CEO, and iWeb would change its name to Tingo Incorporated. Dozy knew that he would never get rich holding these worthless shares. That's when he decided that it was time to make another bold move. 3 months later, Dozy would try to get Tingo Incorporated uplisted on the New York Stock Exchange. Dozy figured his second time would be the charm, considering he was already established over the counter. To his dismay, he would be rejected yet again. His company was just too small. Dozy recognized the difficulty in trying to touch down his way into the market. He knew he had to consistently move up the ladder instead. With that in mind, only 2 months later, Dozy would sell Tingo to another company. MICT was a wealth management company that operated in China, but unlike iWeb, MICT was a NASDAQ-listed company. Dozy owned 3/4 of the merged company and was co-CEO alongside Kenneth Denos. Dozy would also change the name of the company to Tingo Group. Tingo Mobile and MICT were an unlikely duo. MICT was based in China, and Tingo Mobile was obviously based in Nigeria. The company said that this was completely alright. Similar to some Wall Street Bets legends, they said that they only decided to purchase Tingo Mobile after doing extensive due diligence. I'm not sure what type of DD they ended up doing, but I'm sure Dozy was just glad to finally be listed in the US. Despite the fact that these two companies were completely different, Tingo Group seemed to be a whopping success. Bringing in over $2 billion of revenue in the first 9 months of merging, Dozy was thrilled. Speaking of bringing in revenue, our sponsor, bankrewards.io, makes it easy to find and redeem sign-up bonuses for a variety of different banks and brokerages. Moomoo and Chime offer over $100 and 5 free stocks for simply transferring $300. Let's be honest, that's basically free money if you're willing to sign up. Signing up for these platforms is a quick and easy process that can be done in minutes. That's all for our sponsor. If you're interested, check out the link in the description below. Flash forward another 5 months, and Dozy was ready to make another courageous move. He wanted to invest $1.6 billion into a food processing plant that would be located in Nigeria. This revolutionary investment would be Africa's largest food processing plant. Dozy had the idea that they would buy crops from the Tingo farmer marketplace and process this food in their plants. Dozy was going to invest nearly $2 billion into another company to bring this plant to life. This isn't all that brave though, because the company he was acquiring was Tingo Foods. And as you can probably guess, the owner of this new company was none other than Dozy Mmobuosi. Putting 2 and 2 together, that means Dozy was acquiring his own company. Tingo Foods claimed to have $400 million of revenue in their first 4 months of operation. On top of this, they also had over $200 million worth of processed food already available. Strangely enough, Tingo Group would acquire Tingo Foods for only $200 million. This was less than the value of Tingo Foods' current inventory. Tingo Foods would be sold for less than they were objectively worth. This already sounds fishy, but it gets even stranger when we rethink Dozy's claims. Generating nearly $500 million in the first 4 months of operation would be a record. This record-breaking stat intrigued investors across the world. Tingo stock almost 7x'd in just 2 months. Some traders on Wall Street Bets would even get in on the action and started to get a little bit ahead of themselves. JD the Boss predicted the share price would rise to anywhere from $45 to $100. This may seem like a foolish prediction now, but Tingo Tingo was seeing genuine momentum during this time period. Dozy saw the price of Tingo skyrocketing, and he decided that it wouldn't be such a bad idea to treat himself. He spent nearly $250 million worth of shares. He would use some of this money to fund a lavish lifestyle, purchasing things like luxury cars and rides on private jets. With the success of Tingo Group, Dozy had become a billionaire. Joining the 10-figure club, Dozy was starting to get braggadocious. He offered £90 million to buy the football team Sheffield United. Dozy caused an absolute scene by doing this. People across the globe would begin to ask themselves, who is Dozy and how can he afford to spend £90 million on a sports team? This would lead people to do some investigating. Unfortunately, this is when some of the skeletons would start to fall out of Dozy's closet. Exclusive: the man linked with £90 million Sheffield United takeover is a director of a quote-unquote £1 billion airline company, but there's no evidence it ever flew a plane. The business address is forged, and images of Tingo Airlines jet appear to be photoshopped. Joey Dorso, a writer for The Athletic, came out with some news that would discredit Dozy. To provide a bit of context, Tingo Airlines was, of course, created by Dozy. When I said Dozy was a jack of all trades, I wasn't joking. Creating an airline company would be pretty impressive, but as Joey pointed out, it seems like Dozy was lying about the whole thing. In November of 2020, Dozy would make a post to his personal Facebook page that would come back to haunt him. Tingo Airlines was created to cater for the unique needs of African travelers, providing them with a familiar, safe, comfortable, and affordable means of connecting the world. Along with this post claiming to have already created Tingo Airlines, he also posted an interesting picture to Instagram. This picture presented an aircraft owned by Tingo Airlines. This Instagram has either since been deleted or banned from reports. Either way, Dozy probably would have wanted to get some of this evidence off the internet. Receiving public backlash, Dozy decided that he had to go on CNN to defend himself. Dozy claimed that starting an airline company was his dream, but overall, he simply just couldn't do it because of COVID.
There was no evidence of a Tingo Airlines flight ever taking off.
Yeah.
Broad smile across your face. Do you want to address that?
Well, it's so COVID came, and I thought to myself.
Although Tingo Airlines never came into fruition, he supposedly worked with Omni Blue to make Omni Tingo. However, like Tingo Airlines, proof of Omni Tingo's existence is not available online, and it's likely that this is another one of Dozy's made-up stories. At this point, we can see that Dozy is a serial liar, but he wasn't done spreading his lies just yet. Dozy started paying for promotional magazines and articles to help boost his image, much like some other fake gurus in the online space. In another attempt to help boost his image, Dozy would get Nigel Farage, a former member of the European Parliament, to promote Tingo in a video clip.
I wish Dozy and his Tingo team a success as they expand globally.
You might notice that there's something strange going on in this video. Ignoring the fact that he sounds completely robotic, we coincidentally see a strange watermark on the screen. This video is from none other than Cameo. Dozy really paid Nigel Farage $90 to read a script for 20 seconds, and he tried to play it off like no one would see that big ol' watermark on the screen. The hashtag Tingo team is set to sail. At Nigel Farage congratulates Tingo Inc. for its latest expansion across Africa. Yeah, okay. At this point, you might start to wonder, how much of Tingo is actually legitimate? For a company with 9 million customers that brings in billions of revenue, how many downloads would you expect their app to have? An app like OfferUp has 50 million plus downloads in the Google Play Store. If we guessed that they only had 1% of the downloads of OfferUp, that would put it at 500,000 downloads. Unfortunately though, this number is completely off. Tingo's app has a whopping 50 downloads on the Google Play Store. Despite all of this, Tingo was still going strong, and Dozy wanted to keep the ball rolling. Tingo Group needed a board of directors. Coincidentally, the board of directors for Tingo was across the globe. The board of directors mostly lived in France. They couldn't really monitor what Dozy was doing, and he loved this. The board of directors asked for simple details, requesting bank records and a list of employees. However, Dozy denied these requests. He simply claimed that the board of directors did not need this information. In April of 2023, Christoph E. Charlier, a member of the board of directors, was sick and tired of Dozy's shenanigans. He quit and said he just couldn't do his job. This is understandable considering how secretive Dozy was. Dozy didn't need Charlier though. Tingo Group was now making billions of dollars of revenue annually. Or so they said. Tingo Group was actually, shocker, not making billions of dollars of revenue annually. He completely lied about the success of his company to help stimulate the real money maker. And that was, as we've discussed in the video, fooling investors to jack up the share price of a non-existent company. Even though Dozy was completely lying about everything, he wanted to keep the scheme going. Dozy was starting to get arrogant. He felt like he couldn't be touched. This leads us up to his next bold move. As one may guess, you can't just say you make billions of dollars of revenue and show absolutely no proof of doing so. Tingo Group had to get their financial statements audited. But obviously, if their finances were audited, then everyone would see that Dozy was a big phony. Using his critical thinking skills, he did what had to be done. He photoshopped a bank statement to make it look like his company was thriving. The photoshopped bank statement showed that they had an ending balance of $60 million US, when in reality, they only had 2,000. Dozy sent over this photoshopped concoction to Deloitte, the auditors that were affiliates of the same company that did their DD on Tingo. And just like that, Dozy had fooled Deloitte. You might be thinking, there's no way it's just that easy. And you would be semi-right. Dozy knew that pictures of a bank statement wouldn't be enough to fully satisfy auditors. That's why he came up with a monstrous plan that was sure to get them off his tail. Deloitte might have thought that something was a little strange within Tingo's operations. They wanted to double check and make sure that everything was legit. Considering Tingo Mobile had to lease out phones, it would make sense that they would have to spend a large amount on purchasing cell phones. This made sense. And to Dozy's credit, the bank statements did show that Tingo spent $1.5 billion at UGC Technologies. Deloitte wanted to confirm with UGC Technologies that these transactions really did happen. This is where you would expect Dozy to start panicking. He had faked these screenshots, so of course these transactions didn't exist. Deloitte told Dozy that they wanted to contact UGC Technologies directly, and surprisingly, he said sure. He gave them the email to UGC Technologies, and they confirmed that Tingo really did pay for these phones. How was this possible? Well, the truth is that Dozy was UGC Technologies. He made this fake company to help cover his tracks. When Deloitte contacted UGC Technologies, they were really contacting Dozy. Tingo made a lot of money from Nigerian farming cooperatives. One in particular was the Kebbi Multi-Purpose Cooperative Society. Tingo said that they had about 4.5 million customers from this cooperative. That sounds all right, until you learn that the entire population of Kebbi is only 3.2 million. Deloitte also wanted to confirm that the money they received from this company was legit. Doing what he knew best, Dozy booted up Photoshop and got to work. He also made another email for these cooperatives to secretly talk to Deloitte again. The auditors were fooled yet again. Tingo Mobile was a scam, Tingo Airlines was a scam, at least Tingo Foods was a scam, is what I would say if they weren't a scam. Tingo Foods put together a nice little presentation that was filled with lies. They claimed they made $1.6 billion in the first 8 months of being acquired. But in that same slide, they also claim that their plant is only in construction. On top of that, they admit that the photo of their processing plant is just CGI. It seems like every sentence of this presentation contradicts itself. According to the good old SEC, Dozy had sold hundreds of millions of dollars worth of shares, while the stock had some value over the years. Dozy was collecting all this money that was given to him by investors for a company that just didn't exist. Every aspect of Tingo was a complete lie, and everything about Dozy himself seems to be a complete lie. It would be hard to find anything that wasn't a blatant scam within Tingo. Dozy made off like a bandit, and some speculate that he resides in London. Of course, the stock is now halted, and the SEC is going to do some investigating. Dozy himself was charged with securities fraud and faces a maximum of 45 years in the slammer. If one thing's for sure, Dozy definitely mastered Photoshop during the duration of this scheme. He faked some pictures, role-played as another company, and became ultra rich. Huge shout out to Miguel Hazler and 2008 Ford Fusion for subscribing to the Diamond tier on Patreon. Make sure to join if you want to be featured in future videos. Also, shout out to Patrick Boyle and Wall Street Millennial for breaking the story.